and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another outstanding installment from very high above all the insipid and puerile forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Wednesday. We're back in the downtown studio. Ken, every time I walk into this place, it feels like coming home. I mean, if you would be home more often, we could do it.
It does lack the studio dogs, thank God.
It does lack the studio dogs, which, they're an interesting addition to the program, but not here. So anyway, we're back in the studio. Ken's back with us for the today and tomorrow anyway. Friday is going to be kind of an interesting day because it's rodeo week here in Sheridan, and Friday is parade day, which means you're not going to get within 7 blocks of this place.
Yeah.
Unless you walk, which I'm not interested at walking at 6
We could leave a ladder down here and go sit up on the roof and watch the parade.
Yeah, well...
The problem with that is supposed to be, 105 or something?
Yeah, I'm not interested in any of that. So on Friday, we'll be back in the home studio. But I've got a great schedule for the rest of the week. Today on the program, we're going to talk to a guy that you should probably know about, Mr. Sheriff Richard Mack. He is the person that started the Constitutional Sheriff Association.
He's a bit of a folk hero for some of us.
He is a bit of a folk hero. And so we're going to talk to him about what it means to be a constitutional sheriff and get him to weigh in on some of the bigger sheriff-type issues that are happening right about now. And, in lots of counties in Wyoming, the sheriff is up for election. Here in Sheridan County, that's the case. And so we're going to talk to Sheriff Mack about a lot of it. We had a superintendent of public instruction debate last night in Upton. That was interesting. Had a gigantic hailstorm interrupt the beginning part of it. Man, it was so loud in that auditorium, you couldn't really hear anything. And then, we waited for a minute, and then I said, the show must go on. And so we powered through it. But it was an interesting discussion. And one thought about it is all 3 of the candidates were absolutely against any performance-based budgeting in really anything to do with the school. And the main question was that, and I say question, but I shouldn't use that term. They were all topics. And in a debate, the reason why you have a topic and not a question, because if you ask a question, there is a likelihood that one of the candidates may say, well, yeah, I agree, and then put the microphone down, which kind of defeats the purpose of a debate. So you use a statement which forces the participants in the debate to take a position. And on that topic, it was that teachers should be evaluated and held accountable through performance-based metrics. That was the debate topic, and all 3 of them said that won't work. So the 3 candidates, of course, are Representative Tom Kelly, Representative Steve Harshman, and Chad Auer. Chad Auer used to be the education policy advisor for Governor Gordon. But anyway, all 3 of them said, no, we can't use performance-based metrics. here's my question then. Well, how do you determine if a teacher's doing a good job? I mean, what other measurement stick could you use to say whether this person is an effective teacher and this one over here is not? In my mind, I think that you ought to be able to come up with some concrete way of measuring teacher performance. And the downside, if you don't, if it's all nebulous and there's no yardstick by which to determine whether or not your teacher is doing a great job, well then, there's no reason why you shouldn't give them a raise, because you have no way to tell if they're doing a bad job. I mean, you could have a whole classroom full of kids that are being fed all the material and they're not learning a darn thing, and you still got to keep paying the teacher. So I don't know. I mean, I completely disagreed with any of that, and I thought for sure one of them would jump on board and say, you know what, you're right. I don't know what those performance metrics are, but every other, well, except for government, every other occupation, there's a way that your employer determines whether or not you're doing a good job, whether it's revenue or maybe it's the quality of your work, or perhaps in some cases it's the speed of your work. But in every occupation, there's a way that your employer says, Ken is doing a good job here, and this other dude, he's a lackey. But apparently not in education. And in my opinion, I think that is, that's the biggest reason why our education spending is so high, that we don't have a way to determine whether or not a school is performing well. And then when you get to all of the testing, results, the NAEP scores and the YTOP scores, if those aren't used to determine, the performance of a teacher, well then, there's no reason to do them at all, because it's not really telling you anything, nor do you really care about how good a student's performing. So I thought it was an interesting debate. It will be available on the Newsletter Journal website, and I believe the GOP pulled a link to and put that debate on their website. But I don't know. I haven't looked at that one yet. So anyway, it'll be available.
It just occurs to me that if you're looking for a way to measure things, look to the private sector.
Always.
How does that work on the private sector? If you have a private school, how do you determine that those teachers are beneficial for, you don't have one that's running kids off because they don't like them, or they're not learning well, or maybe they don't stand close enough to their razor and are offensive. And
like somebody else I know.
Yes, there are answers. The problem is, in the public sector, we don't want to be that hard on people.
Well, maybe we should be.
Yes, absolutely we should be. And look at that. There's two of me.
Wow. How did you do that?
Well, I don't know if I can do
go.
that.
That's much better.
I can do this.
So
anyway, I'm just saying that what the school needs, and I say this often, when you have something that is too expensive and inefficient, it needs competition.
Yes.
And that's what we need is competition out there, and then these things will begin to sort themselves out, and you'll be able to see who's being successful and who's not, and you'll have a pretty good idea as to why, I think.
Well, I can tell you exactly how this works in the private sector. For many years, I was a corporate trainer for AT&T. And so I literally, how it would work is they would hand me 40 new hires, and I would have to train them on how to do their job. And it was a 6-week program, because there was, I don't even know how many computer programs there were, but you had to teach them the software, teach them sales techniques. How do you deal with the really angry customer? Which, by the way, if you want to see true, unadulterated anger, have somebody on the other end of the phone that's mad at their cell phone. You'll find out exactly how angry people can get. But anyway, the metrics that were used were kind of interesting. It was how often your customer called back. So if, it's a big call center is what it was. And so if a customer calls in and you talk to them, all right, well, did that customer call right back in the next day? Did they call back within a week? Did they call back within a month? Did you solve their problem? Another metric was your sales. Okay, were you a good salesman when somebody called in? Did you say, hey, I see you've got this phone plan. We've kind of upgraded that one. This one's a better deal. You want to go with that? So there were, revenue-based metrics there. Now, a school is a little bit different. There's a ton of revenue that comes into a school, and I don't exactly know how that would look measuring a teacher. But for Steve Harshman says all the time, Ken, you're going to have to correct me on what he says, but essentially he says, well, there's 93 great minds here. We ought to be able to figure out this problem. There's 93 geniuses in here, and it's actually genii. But anyway, but that's what he always says. Okay, so if there's 93 brains down in Cheyenne, surely one of them could come up with an idea of how to measure a teacher's performance. But as up to this point, apparently not.
Speaking of Steve Harshman, and you want to measure performance, Harshman is not real happy right now with the Sheridan Bronc football program.
No, he is not.
Because the results, and Harshman is a really good football coach. He's had outstanding success and done a great job doing that, and the Mustangs will miss him. But you can immediately start to see what are the metrics. Is the team winning? Are you able to recruit kids and bring them in? And in some cases, there are barriers to being able to recruit. Schools don't necessarily have the ability to do that. But I remember, 20, 30 years ago, NC was the place kids wanted to go if they were into sports, because KW just never would compete. And so those metrics just seem natural. You understand them. But then for some reason, we never want to point a finger and say, you're turning out a bunch of ignorant kids that don't understand. And, there's also inherent problems in the system itself, where you try to teach 40 different kids all by the same method, and different kids learn differently. So there's a lot that goes into that. But
well, so we did get to see Coach Harshman last night. When the hailstorm was tailing off, it was still pretty loud in the auditorium, and so Harshman had a hold of that microphone, and we got to see Coach Harshman in action. Here's another interesting.
I see him in action every session. He's walking up and down the aisle. Good little Bill. Good little Bill. Oh, that's a bad little Bill. Bad little Bill.
Well, he's definitely good at his job.
Yeah.
So here's another point that came up, and I disagree with this one too. All three of them agreed that and let's see if I can put this exactly how it was said last night, that the greatest the greatest predictor of student success is their family's socioeconomic status. That was pretty much agreed upon by all three candidates. And I don't think that that's true, Ken. I know a lot of families who are not wealthy at all, and their kids do great in school. I know a lot of families who are pretty wealthy, and their students are crap. So I don't know that that's actually true. And I think if that's the starting point, if we say that a good predictor of a student's success is how rich their parents are, because essentially that's what that argument means.
You're laying the groundwork for more money is the answer.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And so we have to pump more money into the system to compensate for that student's family's low socioeconomic status. And I just don't think that that's true.
Well, there has to be some truth in it for that data to be as prevalent as it is. And, you and I can sit on the outside and say, I don't think it's true, I don't this, but we haven't done any scientific research at all.
No, but we have anecdotal proof.
Yes, we do. But it's obvious, and I guess this is not saying which is right or which is wrong. Sure. It's obvious that is the system's position.
Oh, that's very clear. Yes.
That's part of what I'm talking about, is the system makes certain assumptions. If a child's not doing well, he must be hungry. Therefore, we got to make sure that he's properly fed, because a hungry kid can't learn. On and on and on and on. And all of these ideas, concepts, are built into the system, but the system is not working. Therefore, there are some problems with it.
Well, yeah, and one of the and again, I'm in an interesting position moderating the debate, because right. I don't get to say anything, right? The only thing I can say is, here's what the topic is. But you get to hear all these other people, throw their arguments out there, and what goes through my head is, ooh, I don't know if I would have said that. Here, this is what I would have said. And I think it's interesting that, some of the people that are largely, pretty intelligent and pretty experienced in the area of education, that's where they go. Now, I do think that there are, people who are families who are wealthier. Certainly, they can afford tutors and the best computers and the activities and whatnot. There's more opportunities there. I get that, but I also know a lot of homeschool kids that their parents have a small blackboard, a calculator, and a couple of books, and those kids do just fine. I should know. I mean, I taught a group of 6 of them an argumentation course for the better part of a year. And so I think when you start with that assumption, Ken, I think you hit this one on the nose. When you start with the assumption that because kids are poor, they're not going to excel. Well, I think that you're setting up the goalposts where you want them.
You've also ruined a lot of good movies in the past. What was the one a long time? Up the Down Staircase.
Sure, yeah.
That's an old one. Anyway.
But anyway, it was an interesting debate, and I even got a question in there. And you know what? Maybe I should just tell the audience how I ran this thing, because I don't think I've explained that. So we had 3 candidates last night. I had them pick a number, 1, 2, or 3, and that was the first speaking order. And then I wrote the topics, and I make sure that all of the topics are just running the ball right up the middle, that there's no gotcha questions in there. All of them are right square within the topic area. Because, okay, what do you gain from a gotcha question? Maybe a couple of laughs, but that's about it. So you run the ball up the middle, you ask a question that's right in the middle of the wheelhouse, and you see how they perform. So the speaking times were, everybody starts out with 3 minutes, and then the first 2 people that spoke on the topic, they get a 1-minute rebuttal, and you just kind of rotate around who gets to start on whichever topic. And so I think it went really smooth, just as smooth as our county commissioners debate. And Carrie Drost, who is the Weston County GOP chairman, she's also running the Secretary of State debate tonight, which is in Newcastle, and I think it's at the Newcastle High School. So she told me she's going to use the same format because it worked pretty well. So anyway, tonight, I believe it starts at 6 o'clock. If you want to watch the Secretary of State debate, you should be able to find it on the GOP website. Okay, so the TV in the studio, it's had the chyrons right now. It's a commercial, but the chyron on the TV has been ceasefire over. Now, overnight, Iran fired on 2 private merchant vessels, and now Trump says that the ceasefire with cuckoo Iran is over. And cuckoo is in quotation marks from Breitbart News. And I quote, "The U.S. brokered interim ceasefire with Iran is now over." President Donald Trump made the declaration Wednesday, telling reporters at the NATO Defense Summit in Ankara, Turkey, quote, "These people are evil, sick people," before describing Tehran's negotiators as scum and a cancer that needs to be excised. A clearly angry Trump further added he didn't, quote, "want to deal with them anymore," after launching overnight strikes on the totalitarian Islamic Republic after it attacked commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. The Daily Telegraph reported that talks may well continue, but Trump holds little hope now for an outcome brokered in good faith with Tehran. Asked specifically about the peace deal and the people negotiating from Iran, Trump said, quote, "They're a bunch of scum if you want to know the truth. We don't like them. They're evil people. They're crazy, and they're not going to have a nuclear weapon." Trump accused the Iranians of repeatedly misrepresenting what had been agreed upon in the ceasefire Washington and Tehran signed on June 15th. So, looks like no more peace deal for now.
I just have to suspect that a lot of the problem is who's really in charge in Iran.
I think that's a big problem.
They've killed off enough of the people who were in charge, and then others come up behind them. You make a deal with one cleric or whatever they happen to be called, and the other one is absolutely in refusal, and so you just got this turmoiled mess over there. I think the war is not over until the glass cutter comes in and picks up the old sand.
Well, yeah, and I mean, from the very beginning of this thing, I thought this thing is not going to be over until there is an unconditional surrender, to where they've been beaten down
Exactly.
so heavily that they don't have any
Yeah.
recourse.
Uh, look at Japan
Yep.
and what it took to do that.
Oh, hopefully it doesn't go that
No,
far.
we don't ever want to see that, which is why, if, in my view, and I think I've expressed this before, you don't even start a war unless you're willing to finish one.
Yep.
Don't start a fight you're not willing to finish.
Yeah.
We learned that in junior high school.
Now, I do, looking at this thing kind of holistically, I do kind of like part of the approach. I don't like the whole thing, but I like part of it. And that is, okay, we're going to beat you up a little bit, and then we're going to see if you want to talk peace. And then
Are
if
you
you don't
gonna
want to
cry,
talk
Uncle?
peace, yeah, exactly. And if you
Yeah.
don't want to, okay, then we're going to bring it again. And I think that that's where we're at right
Well,
now.
that is where we're at, but I think after the first time you bring it, there needs to be no doubt in anybody's mind. Um, there are some people you just don't mess with because they're crazy.
Yeah.
You know, and that was one advantage that Trump had for a while, was people didn't know what he was going to do. He might just go do that and wasn't going to take a chance. You knew when his predecessor stood up there and somebody gave him a script, it didn't really matter what he said because he wasn't going to do anything about it.
Right.
So,
Well, and if you think back to the first Gulf War, of which Agent 29 knows a great deal, but we had a clear objective. Now, I personally think that we didn't go far enough, but our objective was get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. We went in guns blazing, and it was the term at the time was shock and awe. And it didn't take very long to get Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. Now, I personally think that we should have gone quite a bit further, but we accomplished the objective. All right, we're done, and we're out of there. But because we didn't go further, I think we ended up with the second Gulf War for reasons that may not have exactly panned out. But we had the objective, we accomplished it, and then we were done. I don't
Well,
see that in this case.
I think going back to that one, when Desert Storm was over, we had accomplished the objectives, and that was the mission. That's how we put the coalition, the international coalition, together.
Yeah.
Where this is what we're going to do. Had we said, when this is over, we're going to look at regime change in Iraq, we probably wouldn't have had the international coalition that
I
we
think
have.
you're right about that.
And
Yeah.
I think the it's like anything else. The broader your objectives, the harder it is to attain. And if they'd have gone into there, which effectively they did a couple of years later when we went
Right.
back into Iraq, and the quagmire persists.
Still.
So yeah, and that's my point. Is if we'd have gone in right after Desert Storm and tried to do that, we still would have ended up with the same
Mess.
indecisive mess because we're not willing to commit to a total annihilation. And that's what war should be. If you see it all over in the Old Testament, God said this is what you're going to do. But we don't. And I understand the desire, but then we make war affordable. We make war useful. We make people that profit from war. And so war you have with you always.
Well, you're right. And two things, and then we're going to take a quick break. First, I think that war needs to be one of those things that's so horrible that you will avoid it at all costs, and that it is the absolute last resort, because it really is really nasty. And second, I think that you have to have a clear, like Ken said, you have to have a clear objective, and the broader your goals, the harder it is to accomplish. But the other thing to consider is we're talking about a region of the world that has literally been at war for thousands of years. That if it's not Iran today, it was Iran and Iraq before, and it was Egypt. And I mean, it is a part of the world that has almost been continually at war, for human civilization. And so, if your objectives are so broad that we're going to change this entire country of Afghanistan, well, maybe that's a little bit broad. The Russians couldn't do it, not to say that we should compare ourselves to the Russians, but they didn't accomplish it. We didn't really accomplish it. Thank you, Joe Biden. And unless we're going to be really decisive with this campaign in Iran, that same result is a definite possibility. This time around, I hope that Trump goes in there and we explain it to them, and they don't have any recourse but an unconditional surrender. So we'll keep you updated on that. I kind of thought this whole peace deal would go this way no matter what. But here we are, and I just saw in the Chiron a little bit ago that it said more strikes on Iran probably tonight. So we'll see what happens. So let's go ahead and take our first break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a really dumb article from Claire McDuff. The Cow Pie, coming up next. The following ad was paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
This is Brent Bean, a Republican for governor. Wyoming families know what matters: law enforcement, emergency services, and supporting strong schools, agriculture, and energy production. But state government keeps growing while priorities fight for resources. That has to change. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending and priority problem. Vote for me on August 18th, and I'll put Wyoming priorities first. I'll return taxes to you, the taxpayer, and make Wyoming number one. Paid for by Brent Bean for governor.
Today's program is also brought to you by Morton Buildings. If you're in the market for any type of building for your property, you need to call Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They're the best in metal building construction, and they've been doing it longer than anybody else around. So it doesn't matter if it's a garage or a barn or maybe something bigger, like a roping arena or maybe a giant warehouse for your business. The two guys you need to call first are Marcos and Jesse. Again, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out on their website, mortonbuildings.com. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, Wyoming's big voice on the right. Welcome back to the program, my friends. To the cow pie we go. Hageman opponent Sam Mead defends his $27 donation to Bernie Sanders. Now, I don't really care how big of a donation it is, even if it's $1 or 50 cents. He's not worth it at all. And if you are going to donate any money to him, I think that that's a little bit suspect. Just saying.
Just a little aside, my opponent's husband has donated to Act Blue.
There you go,
as
stealing my
recently
thunder.
as 2025.
It's true.
It's my thunder.
Well, it will. Okay, so it is that. That is
Yeah.
true. But yeah, that's an interesting story that we will definitely get into. But think about this: if you donate any money to any of these progressive groups, whether it is Act Blue, which, by the way, they are funded by, the Democrat Party, they are funded by some really, really bad people. George Soros, there's a whole long list of
Liz Storer.
Liz Storer. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Really, she is pretty nefarious in the state. And man, if you're hopping in bed with those folks, there are some serious questions. So you might say that it's only $27, David, and it was a long time ago. Yeah, but you still donated $27 to Bernie Sanders. So here's what the cow pie says. Quote, a Washington, D.C.-based super PAC is attacking U.S. Senate candidate Sam Mead for a $27 donation Mead made in 2019 to then presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. So that was only 7 years ago. So in political terms, you might say, well, geez, David, that was 2019. That was so 2019. But really, when you're talking about presidential elections, They only happen every 4 years. And so in this case, we're talking about one that happened. It wasn't 2024. It was the 2020 election. So we're not talking about that long of a time. And it's Bernie Sanders, a guy who is an avowed socialist. And by the way, and don't forget, socialism is just a pit stop on the way to communism. The only difference between socialism and communism is in communism, the government owns the means of production. Everything else is pretty well the same. And so if you're the guy that says, hey, I like this Bernie Sanders fella, I'm going to give him $27, your views are diametrically opposed to the vast majority of Wyoming. And I find it shocking that Claire McDuff in the cow pie is defending him. We'll get into that in just a second.
I was just going to say communism, if communism is a turd, then socialism is just a turd with sprinkles on it.
Do you have lots of experience with that,
Yeah,
Ken?
no, I saw somebody put a meme up on Facebook and I happen to completely agree.
Well, it's true.
Democratic socialism, that's got sprinkles and a ribbon on top.
And a bow.
It's still a turd.
Still a turd. The attack ad surfaced Monday from an X.com post by Club for Growth president David McIntosh. The group calls itself the leading free enterprise advocacy group in the nation and has endorsed U.S. Representative Harriet Hageman, who's running in a 5-way race for the Republican nomination against me, Jimmy Skogard, Jill Edwards, and John Holtz. Now, if you want to know who Jimmy Skogard is, I did an interview with him, I think it was probably 3 weeks ago. It's very revealing. That guy is not a Republican. And if you watch the interview, it is very, very obvious. So McDuff continues. By the way, I'm now referring to Claire McFarland as Claire McDuff, just so you know. You know what a duff is in golf, don't you, Ken?
I do, but I also watched what was it, the Donald Duck and his Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, McDuff says, Meade's political credentials. Now listen to this. Okay, I'm going to read it again. Meade's political credentials stand out in that field. He served as the mayor of Kirby and is the nephew of Wyoming Governor Matt Meade and is the great-grandson of U.S. Senator and Governor Cliff Hansen.
He was mayor of Kirby.
He was mayor of Kirby.
Until they started making whiskey there were only 8 people there, and they were all cousins.
Have you ever been to Kirby, Wyoming?
Yes, I have.
So have I. It doesn't take that long to drive through it. In fact, the only thing there is Wyoming whiskey, really.
Yeah, there used to be a good restaurant there.
I mean, there is...
Butch's Place.
Yeah, there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And so if you're claiming that is a political credential, I mean, that's the equivalent of being Mayor Pete and running for president. And even Mayor Pete was mayor of a bigger town than Kirby.
It makes the mayor of Shoshone look like a big dude.
Big time, man. There's more in Shoshone than there is in Kirby.
There's a lot of cops.
Well, yeah, that's true. Don't speed when you're going through Shoshone. But here's the point I want to make, is that Claire McFarland is claiming that a political credential is who your family is. That doesn't tell us one darn thing about you. The only thing it tells you is your dad was pretty talented, and your uncle, not even your dad, your uncle was kind of talented enough to become governor and only win 27% of the vote, and turned out to be one of the most liberal governors that we've ever had, the predecessor to Mark Gordon.
I think one of the best examples of how that's true is the True family.
Ah, yeah.
I mean, there are members of that family on either side of the political spectrum. The family, and kudos to the Trues and True Oil and going out and reaching the American dream. And then you're going to use that for good or for ill. And still, my sister, bless her little heart, she's got on the back of her car she's got a No Kings sticker. She's got pro DEI stuff on there, I don't know why she's not driving.
Wow, so she's one of the coexist people?
Oh, yeah.
Did you, by the way, have you noticed that every time there's a giant protest and everybody's screaming and carrying around Nazi signs, that it's the people that say we ought to coexist?
Yeah.
Oh, look, the coexist people are rioting again.
Yeah.
So
well, just my point is, we both come from the same background. and yet totally different
Totally
views.
different.
Okay, what changed? Well, for one thing, she went to college in Colorado and got a master's degree in education stuff and speech pathology and
Right.
that. And hey, bully for her. But she came out of there so brainwashed she don't know which way's up.
So if you look up the definition of credential, and I just typed in what is a credential into Google, and yeah, let's see here if it's all right. Here we go from the Oxford English Dictionary. A credential is a qualification, achievement, personal quality, or aspect of a person's background, typically when used to indicate they are suitable for something. So I ask you, Claire McDuff, why is who a person's family why is that somebody's credential? Why does that show you that that person has any particular skill to do anything, much less be a U.S. senator? Those are not credentials. Now, though, that may be the credentials of your family, but they're certainly not yours. It doesn't tell us a darned thing about you, except that you were talented enough to become mayor of a town of about 100 people. That's the only thing that Sam Mead has in his background, except, of course, for Wyoming whiskey, which now I would say that is a credential in the business world.
Yeah, it would be.
You start out making crappy whiskey, and then you actually improve it, and now you can sell it, and people want to actually drink it. That is a credential. Being the nephew of Matt Mead is not.
I've lived in some small towns, including Shell, and other places that actually were incorporated and had a mayor. And it seems like a lot of times the election for mayor in those places came down to whoever didn't show up for the town council meeting got nominated and railroaded.
Exactly.
Yeah, you didn't defend yourself, so now you're going to be the mayor.
Right. Now, even if you look at other small towns in Wyoming, like Ten Sleep, okay, there's a heck of a lot more going on in Ten Sleep than there is in Kirby. I mean, there's several different businesses in Ten Sleep. There's a couple of bars. There's Dirty Sally's, which I understand your credentials are somebody owned Dirty Sally's.
That was one of my family's first endeavors into business. We started Dirty Sally's in, I believe it was 1973.
Great
And
store. I love it.
It is, and it was then, it still is. Dirty Annie's over in Shell was another one of our endeavors. Primarily my stepmother was behind those.
But so what does that say about you? Does that tell me anything about you?
That I probably hate doing those types of businesses because I was forced into indentured servitude as a child. I was a soda jerk.
It's for the same reason that I'm really not a fan of polka dots anymore. My family,
your credentials.
My parents and my grandparents owned Alabam's in Buffalo. Alabam's was a sporting goods store that was white with black polka dots.
Yeah.
Before that, it was white with multicolored polka dots.
I remember that. It always reminded me of the Dr. Seuss book with the dog with the spots.
Oh, yeah, yeah. By the way, if you have to paint all those polka dots, you won't like them anymore. But my point being is the only thing that tells you anything about me is exactly the same thing that it tells you about Ken. That at a very young age, we were forced into indentured servitude in the store. Actually, I enjoyed it. It was my first job. I got to learn a whole bunch of stuff there. But it doesn't really tell you anything about me, except, of course, that my parents owned a building with black polka dots on it.
I got to steal ice cream, all the ice cream I wanted, and I really don't even like ice cream.
You don't like it anymore, do you?
No.
So listen to the next paragraph, which, by the way, is only one sentence long. Hegeman's credentials also stand out. She's the U.S. House incumbent and the daughter of late longtime Republican Senator James Hageman. So Claire McDuff is asking you to believe that is the first, that those are actually her qualifications, that she's the daughter of a Republican state representative, James Hageman. Oh, yeah, and she's the incumbent for the U.S. House. What about her time as a trial attorney? What about all of those cases, all of her experience on the water compacts? How about all of her success as an attorney? Are those her credentials? I would argue yes. They mean way more than who her relatives happen to be. Now, the reason why the cow pie and Claire McDuff is putting this in there is to try to validate the claim that when people say, well, I'm a fifth-generation Wyomingite, and therefore you should vote for me. That's the dumbest thing I've heard.
Oh, it's worse than that.
All right, hit
Okay?
me with it.
The insidious thing about Wyoming is the elitism that exists here. It has existed from the very
Forever.
beginning. Yep. When you had the cattlemen ran everything.
Killed everybody, killed a
Yeah,
bunch
if
of
you get in my
people.
way, you're going to get killed. And so there's this elite group around Wyoming. If you're one of this family, if you're part of this family, if you served in this administration and that administration and on these boards and all that, there is this idea that you are more heavily credentialed if you come from a background of one of these elite groups.
Right, and I think your example of the True family is perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, there is a branch of that family, conservative business people, great. There's another branch that are rabid liberals. I wouldn't want to mention any names, Joanne True, but any liberal cause that you can get around, yeah, she's right in the middle of it. Who, by the way, she was also censured by the Wyoming Republican Party because as a state committee woman, she was raising money for Democrats. Let me repeat that again. Raised money for Democrats. And so her family qualifications don't tell you a darned thing about how conservative she is, which I would argue she's not at all.
Another example about credentials is Liz Cheney. Okay,
Yeah, good one.
Her father was a very good businessman. Because of those connections, he had some opportunities that others wouldn't have. And, on a national scale, he was pretty conservative. What was her credentials? What had she ever done other than retain her maiden name because it was Cheney?
Yep.
And that was her big credential. That's what got her.
That's all it was.
And look what she turned out to be.
Now here's the other part of this. I can trace my family to the 1880s in Arvada. Ken, you can trace your family all probably the similar amount of time to right here. But are we part of the elite group? Well, according to Claire McDuff, we should be, because we've been here for 4 or 5 generations. Clearly, we're part of the elite group. But no, we're not. Now, it doesn't tell you anything about me when I say that my family settled in Arvada in the 1880s, or that Ken, same thing with Ken.
The elite says there has to be wealth.
Yeah, see, there it is, right there.
And wealth, well, there's a reflection in there. People don't just fall off a log and become wealthy. They may be born into a family, and
which is the case here.
And that's the case, yeah. But those first generations that went out and paid the price and built the ranch, and then the next generations come along and tend to squander it. There are also in the Pendergraft family, it frankly was a lot of bad luck.
There you go.
Yeah, my great-grandfather had a going business in Worland at the time, and one night it burned down. There's still some questions about what caused that fire. He was elected first sheriff of Washakie County, and a couple of things happened that he pissed off a couple of people who were involved in some crooked thing. Can you imagine that?
No, not in Wyoming.
And
not at the Cowboy.
He didn't win another election after that.
Weird.
So there are the elites.
Okay, so if these are indeed credentials, as Claire McDuff claims that they are, then the other person that she forgot to put in her article was Joe Barbudo. Joe Barbudo is the longtime chairman of the Wyoming Democrat Party, and his family has been around southern Wyoming for generations, probably as long as my family has been here. But you'll notice that Claire McDuff does not mention that because it's not a credential. And the reason why the name Matt Mead is thrown into the article, and the reason why Wyoming whiskey is thrown into the article, is to lead you to believe that Sam Mead has more qualifications to run for U.S. Senate, or at least the same as Representative Hageman, when the truth is he was mayor of a town of no more than 100 or so people, and that's it. That is the extent of his political experience.
I've been patriarch of a family almost that big.
This is true.
That ought to
This
be
is true.
credentials.
But it's not. And see, this is the point, right? The media, if you take what they write and print and publish at face value, you're not going to learn anything about any of these candidates. And surely you're not going to learn anything about Sam Mead. Now, more about his donating to Bernie Sanders. Club for Growth's political arm, Club for Growth Action, is responsible for the content of the attack ad. It calls Mead not the sharpest tool in the shed and notes that Mead gave money to U.S. Senator Bernie Sanders as an independent from Vermont, why is he donating to a candidate in Vermont, anyway, who identifies as a Democratic socialist. The U.S. Election Commission records show that in 2019, Mead gave Democratic-leaning fundraising platform Act Blue $27 earmarked for Bernie 2020. Mead told the Cowboy in a Tuesday interview that the donation pertained to Sanders' unique ideas about health care reform, which deviated from Obamacare, Mead says, that hurt Wyoming. Quote, now listen to this very carefully. I just have always been really concerned about problem solving and tactical solutions to things, said Mead. At the time, Bernie was the only one talking about health care and providing solutions that, in my mind, make some sense. You know what Bernie was talking about? Medicare for all. Mead said that the attack ad on him by an out-of-state group for not walking the party line is just more of the same and detracts from the issues. Quote, we need to have the latitude to problem solve, and I don't think we can do that if someone's just a partisan hack. Aha! The attack ad has nothing to do with Mead not walking the party line. What it does have to do with is him donating to a Democratic socialist and advocating for crazy things like Medicare for all. And so, Mr. Mead, by the way, why haven't you responded to my request for an interview on Cowboy state politics? You're welcome here anytime you'd like. But Medicare for all or health care, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mead, you being the credentialed Republican that the Cowboy claims, where exactly will I find health care in the Wyoming Constitution? And more importantly, for your prospective job, where would I find it in the U.S. Constitution? The answer to that is nowhere. And if you want to lower health care costs, the number one thing that you should do is try to work to get government out of the health care business, because it should have never been in there in the first place. And I find it outrageous that you're claiming to be a Republican while at the same time advocating that we still monkey around in the healthcare system. So Sanders in 2019 was pushing Medicaid for all, quoting again. At the time, that made sense, said Mead, adding that he was also a Republican then and has been a lifelong Republican. Really? You don't have to have a D at the end of your name to be a Democrat. And yet, there are a bunch of people advocating for similar policies that have no relation whatsoever to the Republican Party platform. Mead continued, I don't think anyone thinks that our current healthcare system is fiscally efficient. We spend twice as much as other developed nations do on healthcare. Mead says that he's not surprised about the ad because campaigns can be fierce. Quote, it's just more out-of-state money going towards Harriet. Of course it is. When anybody is questioned about their political beliefs, it always turns out, well, that's just out-of-state money. You know, it's just these political action committees that have no place here, except, of course, when they support you. So the question is, my friends, why should any one of us support anything that has to do with Mr. Sam Mead if he is going to give money to Bernie Sanders, if he is going to advocate for government still monkeying around in the healthcare system, and if he is not really going to explain exactly who he is? Here's why I say that. He claims to be a Republican and is running at least partly on fixing the healthcare system, which is not government's place at all. So, again, Sam, you're welcome on the program anytime you want. Call me. You've got my number. All right, let's take a second break.
Just a sec.
All right, go ahead.
I wanted to highlight this from our friend Linda. Here it goes.
I'm 70, 490 in dog years. So 7 years ago is yesterday.
Thanks, Linda.
Thanks, Linda. Very, very funny. So, you know, the whole point, my friends, is the media is on one team, or at least the mainstream media is on one team, and they're not going to tell you the truth about these candidates. Certainly not against the the great mayor of Kirby, Wyoming, with all the credentials in the world. Back in a minute. The calendar says that it's summer, and you'll believe it. Well, that's just so cute. But you obviously haven't lived here very long, have you? And you probably think that the weather is just going to continue to warm up. You don't have to worry about snow or ice or 30-degree temperatures anymore. In case you've forgotten, this is Wyoming, my friend, and that sort of thinking doesn't work here. 1 minute, it could be 75 and sunny, and 10 minutes later, snow. Whatever the weather, you need a pair of socks that'll keep your feet cool and dry even on the hottest of summer days. And if you happen to run into that spring snowstorm, you'll stay nice and toasty warm. Well, your feet anyway. To get you a pair, go to the website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. These are the finest socks that I've ever put on my feet. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland. France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the last year and a half been more than you could bear? Well, if it has, you've come to the right place. Call my friend Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only getting stronger. This program will only continue to expand. Cowboy State Politics Live, the Cowboy State Politics Podcast, and now the Open Range Record. Don't miss any of it, my friends. Speaking of the Open Range Record, there is a great article that I believe is still on the top of the list. Another Wyoming Business Council not so great adventure. You see, we dumped several $1 million into a project, and then now it's for sale for $10 million. And they didn't hire all the people that they said they were going to, and now it's totally up for sale. So apparently that's okay too. But it just seems like these businesses continue, these little situations continue to crop up over and over and over again. And you know, we shouldn't ask any questions about them whatsoever.
There's just a little heads up. There's more coming. I got a phone call in the last few days from a gentleman that has documentation on a lot of things that he's seen. And, you know, we're looking into these. We're looking into, is this just somebody with an axe to grind that has a grudge, or is there really something here? But
I mean, they just continue to pile up. So we're going to stay on it.
Where there's smoke, there's fire, and there's a lot of smoke.
Yeah, by the way, go to the Open Range Record, openrangerecord.com, and you can read that story. It's fascinating, man. And I'll tell you, it is kind of a circuitous thing, and, you know, it's an interesting story. Okay, joining me now on the program is a guy I met not that long ago, Sheriff Richard Mack. I met him when I was in Salt Lake City at the John Birch Society National Conference. So, Sheriff Mack, welcome to the program.
Well, is it Cowboy Dave or Wyoming Dave? Or
David works just fine.
Just Dave.
Don't call him
Well,
Cowboy.
thanks so
It'll
much
go
for
to his
having me. It
head.
was a pleasure to meet you, and it was a great event. And I'm actually at another great event right now, even as we speak. I'm in Las Vegas for the Freedom Fest.
Excellent. I
Uh,
wish I could have gone to that. So
yeah, it's an amazing event. They've got some real big headliners, uh, even bigger than me.
all right. Well, why don't you take a few minutes and tell my audience about yourself?
Well, my name is Richard Mack, but I go by Sheriff Mack. That name stuck. I was actually sheriff in my hometown of Safford, Arizona, which is Graham County, Arizona. There's only 15 counties, 15 counties in Arizona, and we're the sixth largest state. So most of the counties are very big, and ours was kind of falling in that line of 4,500 square miles. Small town, small community, about 45,000 people. And I served before that in Provo, Utah. I was actually a cop. I tried to get in the FBI. And so I graduated from BYU in '78, trying to get in the FBI. Thank God that never worked out. But my dad was an FBI, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps and be his only son that did that, but it just never worked out for one reason or another. And so I was working my way through college, and I had a part-time job as a meter maid, a parking enforcement cadet, and then I hired on full-time as a patrol officer in 1979, and I stayed there almost 12 years. And then some crazy people from Arizona kept calling me and calling me and calling me, begging me and ordering me to move home to run for sheriff. And it was my wife's parents.
The in-laws.
Yeah, when everything's going great in your life, the in-laws call for some reason. And neither my wife or me, neither one of us wanted to do that. It was not on our list. I was moving up the ladder and doing everything at Provo PD, and we loved it. We loved our lives. We loved the kids and the schools, and then my wife and I had an epiphany at the same time, and we picked up and moved home to Arizona and ran for sheriff. And miraculously, I was elected, and miraculously, I was reelected in 1992, and then miraculously. And it was just been, Dave, it's just been one miracle after another. Even how I met and married my wife, it was all played into this. And so then the next miracle was Bill Clinton signed the Brady Bill into law.
Yeah.
And it was the first time in American history where a gun control law required every sheriff in the United States to enforce it for the federal government for free without any negotiation. They just commandeered the office of sheriff. In fact, the case is called the anti-commandeering case. And I was the first sheriff in American history to launch a major lawsuit against the federal government, the Clinton administration, no less, take it all the way to the Supreme Court and win. And I have to say, there was one sheriff from Wyoming who joined the case, and there was, but the second sheriff to file was actually Sheriff Jay Prince, Sheriff Jay Prince from Montana, Ravalli County. Then there were 5 other sheriffs, and Sheriff Anders from Bighorn County, Wyoming, was the other one. But this is the crazy thing. Only one sheriff from Texas, and only 7 of us out of 3,086 stood up and fought to save the office of sheriff from federal intervention. And it was just overreaction. It was overreach by the federal government. And one, I don't do gun control. I keep my oath, and I follow and obey the Constitution. Secondly, the federal government cannot tell sheriffs what to do. And that's what I really hung my hat on. And that is exactly what we won on the 10th Amendment. We won on the 10th Amendment. We didn't even file on the Second Amendment. We filed on the 10th, and the 10th saved the Second Amendment
Yeah.
in this particular case.
Yeah, absolutely did. So you went on to found an organization called, and correct, I'm probably not going to get the name wrong or get the name correct, but the Constitutional Sheriffs Association.
The Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association, CSPOA, CISPOA, yes.
All right. So I guess my first question would be, and you know, most people think that they understand the office of the sheriff, but I don't think that that many people actually do. So if you could talk to me about that.
Sheriffs don't.
See, and that's a problem. So
I know.
How important is the office of the sheriff?
Well, if you appreciate freedom, it's vital. And if you believe that when government becomes venal and oppressive and abusive and violates the Constitution and violates your rights, if you believe that there should be somebody locally that can keep that in check and stop it and protect you and ensure that your God-given rights are protected, then that's your sheriff. He is the first line in the sand. He's the last line in the sand, and he is the ultimate protector of the people. And when government comes into your county, let's say the IRS comes into the county and just starts taking everything from you, takes your bank accounts, takes your cars, your home, maybe even your kids. To whom can you turn for peace, safety, and protection? And if that's not the sheriff, then you don't have one. You don't have it. Look, Madison and Jefferson said that the states are responsible to do that. And in my Supreme Court decision, it says the same thing. Scalia wrote the decision. And so you can know it was a pretty darn good decision, and it was. It was amazing. But he actually quotes. Now, have you ever heard a Supreme Court case where the Supreme Court and the one writing for the majority actually quote the Federalist Papers?
It doesn't happen very often.
And he names the number. And in Federalist 51, he says, hence a double security arises to the rights of the people. The different governments will control each other. And that's your sheriff, especially. Is the state supposed to do it? Yes. They're supposed to do what Jefferson and Madison said in the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. So they used the word interposition, interpose, that the state's power will be interposed on behalf of the people to protect them. And then it's up to the states to decide what decrees from the federal government will be followed and which ones are constitutional. And so Jefferson said this too, we don't have to go to court every single time the federal government gets something wrong. The states can just say no. And the person in the state that can really do that the most is the sheriff. And what I get from too many sheriffs is, oh, I have to obey everything the federal government says. I have to obey whatever the Supreme Court says. And I said, then why don't you obey my case? Sheriffs are afraid to even look at my case. And I've dedicated my life and the organization CSPOA, which every American citizen can join. In fact, we need more people involved in this because the only boss your sheriff has is we the people. And that's what people don't get. And so we need the sheriff's boss as a part of our organization, so you can go to your sheriff and say, look, I'm part of the CSPOA. I'm a member of the CSPOA. And I never ask sheriffs to be members. Some are members on their own. But I don't do membership or dues with sheriffs because I don't want them to say, oh, this is only about money. And so I've never done that. All we want from sheriffs, and what I've dedicated my life to, is that they will keep their oath of office. They will enforce and defend the Constitution. They will just, what their oath says, uphold, defend, protect, and preserve the United States Constitution, as they swore to do in the first place.
No, I'm sure it's the same in every state, but in Wyoming we have what's called the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, and it's a big
Yes.
lobbying organization.
Yes.
But if you look at it's Wyoming, and I'm sure it's the same in Arizona. But every session we have a number of different Second Amendment related bills on a variety of different angles. But invariably, the Sheriff's Association, they're the ones that oppose it. They are the first people to come out and say, no, you can't. We don't want you to have, we don't want to get rid of gun-free school zones, or we don't want to be held accountable when there's a federal overreach in our county. Yeah. And so, talk to me about the difference between your organization and these, lobbying groups of sheriffs and chiefs of police.
Well, first of all, we're absolutely appalled that sheriffs and chiefs and other police take the side of the gun grabbers. Especially Wyoming. Wyoming actually has sheriffs that support gun-free zones.
Yep.
What is that? What's a gun-free zone? Boy, how has that worked out for us, Dave?
Not very good.
No. But even if it did help, which it never has, even if any gun control law has ever provided any peace or safety or security in any way, it hasn't. However, even statistics can be manipulated. It's still against the law. Gun control in the United States of America is against the law. And if a sheriff and chief of police can't even get that and understand that the Second Amendment says shall not be infringed, that most Democrats take the word not out of it and they just, shall be infringed. There's over 20,000 gun control laws, state, federal, and local, that have been on the books for decades. And they always bring up more. And the statistical analysis is clear, especially if you look at Professor John Lott.
Yeah, I love him.
Who wrote the book, More Guns, Less Crime. And that's true. And the self-defense uses of guns. But it's still, even with his tremendous statistical analysis, in my first case at the district court level, Judge John Roll pointed his finger at the federal government lawyer and said, do not pretend in this courtroom that your statistical analysis equates to constitutionality. And that's the whole thing. None of that is constitutional. And for a sheriff to actually side with stupid gun control laws that are meaningless and have actually made things worse for us, which is also a quote from Jefferson, laws that forbid the carrying of arms only make things worse for the citizen and better for the assailant. And so none of it makes any sense, especially when you consider states like Arizona and Wyoming that are big time gun states.
Well, listen to this one.
And I've just, it's like I'm beating my head against the wall trying to get sheriffs to understand the simple thing called their oath of office and read what the founding fathers said about the Second Amendment. And I know this is why I joined the JBS myself. I know that JBS understands that, and that we just need so much more of that type of effort across our country.
So last session we had a SEPA bill. Well, we already have one, but this one just kind of expanded it, and it would have added a civil penalty for law enforcement personnel that that violate somebody's constitutional rights. Now, the interesting thing to me is that when that bill came up on the floor, the Sheriff's Association, and I don't know how many sheriffs they had, but they had the majority of Wyoming sheriffs in the gallery standing there cross-armed. Ken, you could probably tell us. By the way, Sheriff Mack, my producer is Representative Ken Pendergraft. He was there on the floor, so he could probably.
I don't remember how many. I don't remember how many were actually present there.
There were a lot of them.
But we got letters from all 23 counties, all the chiefs of police, all the sheriffs. They were virtually unanimous. And when you're sitting down in that fishbowl and you look up at the balcony up there, and you see full of law enforcement officers, I actually got pulled over shortly after that meeting, and I thought, oh, great, here we go.
Here we go. But
It's pretty intimidating.
yeah, but what amazed me is that it didn't appear that there was one sheriff. And again, I don't know if all of them were there, but I was sitting in the gallery looking at all these badges around me. Felt pretty safe, or maybe not, depending on how many of them listen to my show. But what amazed me is how few actually stood up and said, no. I mean, we've got to, we've got to follow the Constitution. But it just seems to me that so many sheriffs don't.
Well, that's the sad thing. We have had some sheriffs really stand for the Second Amendment. In fact, 3 times in the past 30 years, including our Supreme Court case, there have been sheriffs that stood against Obama and his proposal of more gun control. And then the Utah sheriffs actually did this twice, where they unanimously, even one time with the Salt Lake County sheriff, who is very woke and very progressive, very Democrat. She even joined in with all the sheriffs. She wanted to present a united front.
Right.
And they wrote a letter to Biden and said, and the word was used about 10 years ago, 12 years ago when it was Obama, and then Biden, the same thing. They said, we will not tolerate the federal government coming into our state and making our citizens criminals, a law-abiding citizen, a criminal simply because they possess a gun that you're trying to make illegal, and talking about the assault rifle ban, and it had a huge impact on stopping all of this nonsense, and so and then our lawsuit, people didn't know that there were actually 5 Brady bills to be scheduled one year after another until after 5 years, the Second Amendment would have been completely destroyed. And so Brady Bill 1, I was the only one at the time that was suing to stop Brady Bill 1. And 2 weeks later, after I filed, Howard Metzenbaum from New York introduced Brady Bill 2. And it never made it out of committee, in large part because Brady Bill 1 was in litigation. And I have to give a shout out too for the NRA, because I didn't know what to do when I was going to sue the federal government. I asked my wife, and she gave me her endorsement, which was another miracle.
Right.
And go ahead and sue the federal government. Yeah, sure. No, I was scared to death. She was scared to death, but we both agreed that it needed to be done. And then so I talked to my undersheriff, and I wasn't a member of the NRA. I wasn't a member of anything back in those days. And I said, hey, Mike, you're a life member of the NRA, aren't you? I said, do they have a toll-free number where I can call and get advice and some help? And he goes, here it is. I said, he said, I've never called it, but you can try it. And it was like calling a number at the White House or something. It got passed around and put on hold. Finally, I ended up in the office of Richard Gardner, and he was a lawyer for the NRA. And I told him who I was, what I wanted to do, and the next line out of his mouth changed my life forever. He said, Sheriff, we've already been preparing the paperwork on this case, and we've been praying that you would call. And I said, you don't know me. I'm not even a member. He goes, it doesn't matter. I don't know you. You're correct. But we needed a sheriff, and you're the first one to call. And we're ready to roll with you. And they raised the money. And I also hired a former lawyer for the NRA. His name is Dave Hardy. And of the 7 sheriffs that did this with me, I was the only one that hired my own lawyer. They all did, the NRA lawyers, who was Stephen Halbrook, who I now might be retired, but he was a federal judge for a while. And so we're talking, this happened, the decision came out June 27, 1997, so 29 years ago. And it's still intact. There's nothing been changed. And this is a copy of the case. And
Prince versus
and
UA.
I did a highlighted version of it, and this is available at cspoa.org. It's very small, but it's the most powerful 10th Amendment decision in the history of America. And when people read it, they totally agree that it is. And one place where it presents that power, just the one quote I did from Federalist 51 is astonishing, but there's a lot of others. As Madison expressed it, the local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy. So the federal government isn't the only one supreme. In fact, they have the least amount of supremacy. The counties have the most, and the states have more than the federal government. And that came from Federalist 39, and quoting from the decision. And then my favorite quote I have memorized, but the Constitution protects us from our own best intentions. And then it goes down a little further and says, and provides an expedient solution to the crisis of the day. I apologize, my voice keeps cracking.
Getting too excited.
Yeah, well, that's true. I do, and my wife always has to calm me down. But this was such a miracle, and it also cost me my third election because it caused such a great controversy, and even the gun owners and even people who believed in what I was doing did not believe I was going to go to the Supreme Court, and I didn't either. I never thought it would go to the Supreme Court, and what happened to guarantee that, almost guarantee it, is that Prince and I are in the Ninth Circuit. And so after we won at the district court, we got overturned at the Ninth Circuit. No big surprise there.
Right. The Ninth Circuit.
But Sheriff Coog and Sheriff Romero, who were in the Fifth Circuit, one from Louisiana, one from Texas, they went to the Fifth Circuit in New Orleans, and we got the opposite ruling. They totally supported this. They totally said, yes, this is a huge violation of the 10th Amendment. And they shook their finger at the Ninth Circuit. And so with opposite rulings at the appellate courts, that guaranteed us a trip to the Supreme Court. And Sheriff Prince and I were the two litigants at the Supreme Court. And I actually met the person in a wheelchair for whom the Brady bill was named, and that was James Brady. Who was the press secretary for Ronald Reagan during his assassination attempt in March of 1981.
Well, interestingly enough, so that case, Prince versus New York, or Mack/Prince versus New York, it actually appears in Wyoming statute. It's in our first version of the SAPA bill. So I want to talk politics with you for just a few minutes. We're in the middle of an election. There are sheriff's elections all across the country. We've got one here in the county I live in. So what are the questions that need to be asked of sheriff candidates to find out, where they're at on, the Constitution? I mean, what are the good questions to ask them to reveal whether they're a constitutional sheriff or not?
Almost in every sheriff forum, somebody stands and asks this question: are you a constitutional sheriff? Oh, most of them will say, oh, yeah, of course, yes. And then you ask them, have you ever supported gun control laws since you've been sheriff? And then wait for their answer, and then you've got to ask this one. If the federal government comes in to confiscate guns from law-abiding citizens, what will be your response? What will you do about it? We've actually had sheriffs say, oh, I'll quit before that. Oh, I'll resign. I don't want you to quit. We want you to do something about it, Sheriff. Do your job.
Exactly.
So, yeah. So those related questions, and then somebody will even ask, well, are you a member of the CSPOA? And obviously most of them will say no to that. There's a lot of sheriffs that we've worked with that claim that they're part of the CSPOA, and that's fine. We've had other sheriffs join the CSPOA just for political reasons, so that they can say they're a member. And so, oh yeah, I'm a constitutional sheriff. I'm a member of the CSPOA. So, no, I didn't ask if you're a member of the CSPOA. I want to know if you're a constitutional sheriff. And what have you ever done to tell the federal government to take a hike. Like the incident with the Bundys in Nevada. That sheriff showed up, but he was way late and he never stopped anything.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when the order to kill the protesters was given, a deputy sheriff actually interposed and put himself in the way right before the federal government sharpshooters started killing people. That saved another Waco or Ruby Ridge from happening that day. One deputy, Tom Roberts, Lieutenant Tom Roberts, stood in the way. He said, "What? We're going to kill these people over cattle?" And he actually changed the history of that entire event. But Wayne Hage in Nevada was doing the same battle. And Sheriff Tony DeMayo in Nye County actually stood up and told the federal government to leave when they were trying to confiscate cattle. They said, he said, "You're not confiscating anything. This case is still in litigation. You don't have any authority to take the cattle, which have been here for a century or more." And the federal government threatened the sheriff and said, "We're coming back with our SWAT team." And he said, "Fine, I've got one too." And they never came back. And I had an incident where I had to ask the EPA and Army Corps of Engineers to leave my county. And they did. They threatened to arrest workers trying to fix a bridge on a river. And they threatened to arrest all 3 county commissioners. I said, "You're not going to do that in my county. You have no law enforcement authority here, and you're not going to do that. We're going to fix this bridge, and you're going to get out of the way." And that's exactly what happened. And they left, and we fixed the bridge, the federal government notwithstanding.
Well, we had a situation kind of like that, not 20 minutes from here. Small, tiny Wyoming town, 20 ATF agents and state level agents and the local sheriff's department show up at this guy's house. And there's it's not a clear cut case, but what is clear cut is the ATF showed up in the early morning hours, raided this guy's house, took his guns and his girlfriend's guns. And I think it took her 3 years to get her guns back. But the interesting thing that I find out of it is they execute the raid and they don't arrest anybody. Now, wait a minute. If a guy's breaking the law, why don't you arrest him? Well, they don't do that. Instead, they took his guns. And so I think that there's this misconception that because you may live in a small community, or you may live in Wyoming, or you may live in Arizona, that, the feds aren't going to come into our community. Well, that's bullcrap, because they have a long history of, abusing their authority.
Of course. And that's when the sheriff needs to step in. But the thing of it is, the sheriffs of this country need to put the federal agents and local agents from the state. They need to put these bureaucrats on notice that if you ever come into my county, check with me first. Because first, we'll help you. If you got something great, we'll help, absolutely. But the thing that happened in Bighorn County, Wyoming, when it was Sheriff Dave Mattis, they didn't check with the sheriff first. And it ended up, the Castaneda family sued the county and the federal government for an early morning raid where they had the wrong family.
Oh.
And so Dave Mattis was one of the original constitutional sheriffs in the entire country. And he became a very good friend of mine. And we were sheriffs together for a while, very short time. But then when I formed the CSPOA, we had him speak at our first event in Las Vegas. And he has since passed away. But what a great man. He knew his job. He knew his responsibility. And he came up with the policy that the federal government and this was pursuant to the lawsuit. And the attorney general over that area asked him several times, if they don't obey, you let me know. And folks, this is exactly what should be happening nationwide. The sheriffs, we're not telling the federal government you can't come in, even though they have very limited authority, but they only have 5 law enforcement powers. Those 5 powers allow them to come in. But still, even then, there should be a check and balance, and they should report to the sheriff first. The 5 law enforcement powers the federal government was delegated within the Constitution are treason, counterfeiting, felonies committed on the high seas or piracy. They're required by law to protect our borders. That's Article 4, Section 4, and then violations of treaties. That's it. That's the only thing they get. Those 5. And so federal government should be watched very closely because they usurp authority almost on a daily basis, and they've stolen thousands of powers that were never intended to be theirs in the first place.
No, I think you're exactly right, and I'm pretty sure you could. Maybe you couldn't go to any town in America, but you can go to most of them, and you'll find federal officers of a variety of different suits. And here's the other thing that in Wyoming you see that most people don't know. The BLM has their own law enforcement agency. They are federal agents. And so, even though you may live in a small Wyoming county, that doesn't mean that there aren't feds there. There probably are. And all of them need to obey the same law.
And that was actually, that story about the BLM trying to run roughshod was actually in Range magazine in 2006. And I had the copy of that. And they interviewed 3 different sheriffs, one from San Bernardino, California, one from Eureka County, Nevada, and then one from Owee County, Idaho. And those 3 sheriffs all said the same thing. These federal agents think they can come in and run roughshod and do everything they want. And Sheriff Jones in Eureka said, it's not going to happen in this county, not as long as I'm sheriff. And see, that's what we need. We've had some great sheriffs do some great things over the years. But the thing of it is, it might be our only peaceful and effective solution that we have left at this point. If the Democrats keep moving the way they're moving and trying to replace our Constitution with the Communist Manifesto, then I honestly believe it's going to be our only peaceful solution left.
Well, and it should be, honestly, Sheriff Mack, it should be the first line of defense, the first solution that people seek out. When something goes wrong in their community, they should go to the sheriff and say, hey, sheriff, this is happening to me, please help. Right. And I think that too often, sheriffs just think that they're another law enforcement agent. And while they are, that's not their chief duty. I mean, they're the representative of the people, and the people are their boss. And it's very different than being the chief of police or fed.
And it's really sad that most people don't get that. And like I say, I've been this lone man in the wilderness trying to bring all this out. I've written 7 or 8 books about it, and I've done seminars all over the country, but they're too small and it's not enough. And we really need to raise the money to have one national convention where we get 1,200 sheriffs there. And I believe that we could do that, but because with all the work that I've done the last 30 years on this, there's not a unification, there's not a unity amongst the sheriffs about this. And you're right, the sheriffs believe that they're just another law enforcement officer to write tickets and to go after drug dealers and druggies and investigate crime. And a lot of that is part of the sheriff's responsibilities. But just as you alluded to, the primary responsibility of the sheriff is to protect the people in his county and specifically protect their God-given rights. It's back to civil rights. And it's whatever happened to civil rights in our country. The NAACP doesn't do anything about it anymore. They're just a branch of the Democrat Party. But really, I believe that the CSPOA is the biggest organization in the country really promoting the defense of civil rights today for all people. And that, in fact, that's one of our questions we want people to ask sheriffs. And I asked that in my book, The County Sheriff, America's Last Hope. If you recall back into time when Rosa Parks was arrested December 1st, 1955, Montgomery, Alabama, what would you have done? Would you have arrested Rosa Parks? She was arrested for not giving her seat to a white man. We absolutely appall that. and those two deputies that arrested her should have been fired. They should have taken her home, escorted her home safely, and then provided extra patrol for her and her family after that to make sure the KKK or other groups or anyone didn't come to burn their home or worse, lynch them or whatever. And this is what we're dealing with here. And this is serious stuff. So if you were called to that scene on the bus when Rosa Parks was arrested, what would you have done, deputy? What would you have done, sheriff? And I hope and pray that, especially now today, they should know I would not have arrested her. I would have escorted her home safely.
Excellent. Well, Sheriff, I got to run. If my listeners want to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
Well, I didn't tell you about my new book.
Oh,
yet.
yeah. I better let you hawk your book first. Go ahead.
I'm actually doing a speech here at the Freedom Fest about the book. And look at that title, look at that cover. The Democrat Murder of America. And Dave, that's it. And folks, this is a wake-up call for Democrats and Republicans and all Americans. We believe that we have about 3 months to save the birthday of 250 years of our country. We have about 3 months now to save our country. And we believe that this book is a huge component of that. You've got to be educated first. You've got to be informed. And this book absolutely really does it. It tells the truth about JFK. It tells the truth about Martin Luther King. It tells the truth about Nikita Khrushchev, who threatened America and warned us that we would accept socialism until we finally wake up and realize that we're a communist nation. And he said that he would bury us. And folks, it's come to that point that they would bury us. He was the communist leader of the Soviet Union, and he warned us. And now that's all being fulfilled by the Democrat Party. Yes, we want Democrats to read this book. It's very bold. It's very offensive. But if you read the epilogue first, you'll see how we're trying to bring people together. And this, hopefully, this will get everybody's attention. And you can get the copy at murderofamerica.com. It's on my website too, cspoa.org, and you can get this marvelous, amazing Supreme Court case. But the main thing we're pushing right now is get the book, get it to your friends, give it to your favorite Democrat, and let's save America this year. We're really at a threshold that if we don't wake up this year, it might be too late.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, Sheriff. Have fun at Freedom Fest. Wish I was there to join you. And you're welcome back on the program anytime you like.
Well, I would love to do that, Dave. Thanks so much for having me, and God bless us.
God bless you. All right. That was Sheriff Richard Mack. Fascinating guy. Like I say, I met him in Salt Lake City when I was there for the JBS conference. So get his book, The Democrat Murder of America. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will finish up the program. Are you sick to death of being told what to think? Maybe you don't even realize that it's happening. Freedom Caucus bad, big spending, big government, liberal, Republican good. Conservatives are bad and they want to starve little children. I have heard it all, my friends. We are way past the time when the news was just the news, if it ever was. But wouldn't it be nice if you had a news platform that was at least honest about what they were telling you? News on the news page, opinion on the opinion page. That's exactly what the Open Range Record is. Go to the website, openrangerecord.com. News, analysis, opinion, and investigative journalism. One more time, that website is openrangerecord.com. You can listen and watch Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble every Tuesday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pay attention to all that other block-headed, Borg-like so-called news if you want. But if you want to get the real story, watch Cowboy State Politics live. And now, back to the program. Fascinating guy, Sheriff Mack. I met him in Salt Lake City, and I was just telling Ken during the break that I finished up giving my speech, and it was, the speech was partly, let's talk about Jesus, and secondly, let's see how he can, by being on his team, we can elect conservatives. But anyway, right after I got done with the speech, there was another speaker, and so we were kind of in a big room, and we took a break, and Sheriff Mack comes running up to me, and he says, "Oh, man, you're from Wyoming. I got to meet you. Why haven't I been on your program?" And so we got to talking for a little bit. So anyway, you can find his book, The Democrat Murder of America, and go ahead and send me a comment or send me an email about him. So anyway, back to today's program. I guess we still are in today's program, but so from justthenews.com, Trump panel finds Smithsonian American History Museum ideologically captured and engages in activism. I know this is absolutely true because I've seen it with my own eyes. Now we have this mistaken belief that because something is in a museum, there's an exhibit or whatever, that's how it happened. But we have to understand that museums are run by people. And today, more often than not, the folks that are in positions of authority running museums or on museum boards, you got to be really careful that they don't have a political agenda. Now, remember, a lot of the people in Washington, D.C., where the American History Museum is at, Joe Biden selected the people that are, a lot of them that are in charge of these places. And we tend to think, okay, Trump came in, he's the president, he's going to replace them all. Well, that's not necessarily true. From justthenews.com, the White House quietly released a final report from the Domestic Policy Council outlining evidence of ideological capture and activism from the leadership of the National Museum of American History, which, by the way, if you ever get a chance to go, you should go to the American History Museum. You'll see things in there that you won't be able to see anywhere else that are just truly, absolutely tremendous. While President Donald Trump marked the 250th anniversary of American independence with great fanfare in the nation's capital city, his White House quietly released a report from the Domestic Policy Council detailing ideological capture and activism in infecting the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. The museum was first approved by Congress in 1955 to tell the national story of the United States and, quote, to place before visitors a stimulating permanent exposition that commemorates our heritage of freedom and highlights the basic elements of our way of life. But the museum's current leadership has instead sought to use the institution as, quote, a political instrument to accomplish its own ideological goals at the expense of its original mission. The Trump administration argues in the report titled Saving America's Story, How Ideological Capture at the Smithsonian Erases Our Heritage. The council's review of the museum was in response to a March 27th executive order aiming to purge revisionist and ideological materials from U.S. history references and exhibits at federally funded museums. Now, here's what the mandate was. Our current finding is not that the museum has simply added overlooked stories, corrected perceived errors, or broadened its historical scope. Rather, it is that the museum leadership has explicitly adopted an ideological framework that no longer treats the American story as a shared national inheritance to be taught or celebrated, but as a political instrument to divide, dispirit, and discourage our citizens. The council specifically singled out the director, Anthea Hartig, and delivered blazing criticism of her leadership, arguing that she has recast the museum as an instrument of her own social justice agenda. In the wake of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, Hardig said, quote, we work to reframe the traditional celebratory narrative of U.S. history for visitors. How could the narrative of U.S. history, the entire narrative, be reshaped by a riot that was sparked by a narrative that was absolutely false about events that happened? In other words, how could the National History Museum lie about events that happened? Well, it's pretty easy if the person running it is an ideologue. That following year, Hardig spoke at the University of California at Riverside and described how she believes the museum profession, quote, has to figure out how we're going to problematize the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence in 2006, and that loving America is very complicated. The director of the National History Museum said that. Now, these aren't the words of an objective historian, but rather those are of an activist advancing an ideological agenda contradictory to the museum's founding purpose of fostering patriotism. The whole point in bringing up this article is that while I think that we have tremendous museums in this state, and we do, if you've ever gone to the museum in Buffalo, it's absolutely incredible. You'll see things that you won't see at any other museum. Or similarly, if you go to the Hoofprints of the Past Museum in KC, you'll learn things about the Johnson County Cattle War that you've never known before. Or if you go to Sheridan and go to the Kendrick Mansion, you'll see an entirely different perspective of that same time period that's not wrong, but it's the history of Sheridan County. And so without those things telling people the truth about our history from either side, and, within 30 miles, one of the most violent periods in Wyoming history, you'll get two different perspectives, and they're both true, and they're both important.
So here in Sheridan County, the county museum, and I had a technical difficulty there because I don't have the subscription that they want me to have to show you a picture of, I can't really call him a friend, an acquaintance of mine, Tom Warnicke, who has built dioramas for museums for many life. Meticulously well done, has an artist or two that he works with to do the backgrounds. I happen to help do some of the casework and millwork and set one up for the one that's in the right across the street.
I was just going to ask you if that's one of his.
That's one of his. And they're just incredibly fun to look at because all the detail and things that goes into it, every character is individually painted. And he had one of these dioramas up at the Sheridan County Museum, Historical Museum. And they changed the board there and brought in a new administrator. And she decided she wanted to tell a different story. And of course, Sheridan County, there's a lot of Indian battles and other things that go on. And she wanted to retell the story from another perspective. And I'm not saying that what her perspective was wrong either, but it was more from the Native Americans' perspective. I think museum ideally ought to show both perspectives.
Sure.
But she came in and took a lot of these things down, took one of Tom's dioramas, who knows what it's worth, and in the end of the story, the thing ended up sitting outside and got damaged by rain.
Oh no!
Which is horrible. And that there's a discussion about whose fault it was or whatever, but it's what happened.
Right.
And then they put the museum back together. They actually moved downtown now and put the museum back together. Totally different take on local history. But that revisionist history idea, the accepted norms of how the story's been told for years and generations are now being revamped, and there may be some value and some truth in that, but I think there's also a lot of just BS.
There is.
Yeah.
And I often say, Ken, that history is neither good nor bad. It just is.
Yeah.
And the point of the reason why you learn history is so that you don't make the same mistakes that your ancestors or predecessors did. The hope is that you learn from those mistakes and we don't repeat them again. But the only way that we can learn who we are is by understanding history, and the only way that you can understand it is if it's presented fairly, as it is, scars and all. You see, I told you yesterday, I think it was yesterday on the program, that has America done some bad things? Yep, absolutely right. There is no excuse for slavery. Did we treat Native Americans horribly? Yep. We broke a lot of treaties and we did some really bad stuff there. But have we also done some incredibly good things? Yes. One of the things that makes America so great is that we learn from the mistakes that we've made in the past and we try to correct them. But the only way that you can correct those things is if you know that they exist. You see, history ought not be taught from a perspective, this person's perspective or this person's perspective or Ken's or my perspective. It needs to be taught for what happened. Now, you often hear the phrase, well, the history books are written by the winners. This is true. But if we're being honest about who we are, honest about what happened, the things that we did, we need to tell the entire story. Now, it's very interesting to me living in Sheridan now, having grown up in Johnson County and learning, maybe just one side of the story. I still believe that Kendrick was a gigantic a-hole that killed a lot of people. He was. But it's interesting seeing the perspective from living in Sheridan versus living in Buffalo. You drive into downtown Buffalo, and there's a statue of Nate Champion with a pistol drawn. Okay, that's the history of Johnson County. The history of Sheridan County is the same, but events happen differently here. Mm-hmm. There are stories where the first time Kendrick went to Johnson County to kill everybody, you go to downtown Buffalo, and you're going down Main Street, and you get right to the center of town where there's that stoplight. Well, there's a hill there, and at one point, you can't see what's down the hill, right? You're going up to where the stoplight is now, and you can't see down the other side. Well, what Kendrick did not see is the town people lined up across the street waiting for him. And what happened was not a gigantic gunfight. It was I don't think we want to stick around for this. And they turned around and came back to Sheridan. But you see, you have to understand what happened there, both perspectives, and to get the true idea of what's happening. History is important, and we got to learn it, scars and all. And when you have somebody that's running the American History Museum that's an ideologue, well, you're only going to hear one side of the story, and it's never going to be in America's favor. It's going to be the political ideologues.
Let me give you a great example that might not occur to some people of a really good, accurate history where things are covered warts and all, and that's Scripture.
Oh, yeah.
You look at King David. You look at his life. He wasn't a perfect man. He made some mistakes. He had a man killed. A number of different things like that. You look at the story of Noah, and there are stories in there. What it does is tell you what happened so that you can understand why other things happened as a result. And that's imperative, that we have an honest look. And that's what is so frustrating about the press, not only in Wyoming, but that's acutely aware to me because I'm involved in a lot of things that they report on.
You're on the front page, usually.
If they would report things accurately, I don't care if you don't agree with me or whatever, report accurately and let people make up their own mind. Let us learn from history. But when we cloak it in lies, we end up confounding us and dooming ourselves to more trouble later.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
Of course I am.
Well, I mean, it happens so often in this studio that, documented to be almost always right. All right. Well, we pretty much burned up the majority of today's program, and so we'll say goodbye for this afternoon. Tomorrow we'll be back on the program. We've got a couple of interviews. Tom Kelly's going to be here. But from the base of the Bighorn, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you tomorrow, my friends.